Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is you are watching us. Thank you for tuning in. This time we are here with Tristan. Hey, Tristan.
Hi everyone.
So good to have you here. We have been offline for a few weeks because of the Power BI Summit and a lot of other things happening. So uh, back to our webinars again. Tristan is joining us from France. Are you in Paris or other cities?
No, I'm in the south of France, in a
South.
small city called Antibes, close to Nice and Cannes.
Oh, that looks really nice place to be, especially
Yes, it
these
is.
days.
It is.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll just do some like housekeeping things. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat window. We'll go through most of the questions at the end of the sessions. We anticipate it's 40 minutes presentation, but if it is a very related question to the topic, we might have that in the middle of the session as well. So
Yes.
that's me. Tristan, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. So, hi everyone. My name is Tristan. As Reza said, I'm from France. I'm really happy to be here with you. I was about to say tonight, but depending on where you are, we are actually at night in France, but you might be from other countries. I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I wanted to say thank you, Reza, for inviting me to this online webinar. So the topic
Thank you.
is Power BI in Excel. I don't have too many slides. It's gonna be most of the time demos on showing the interactions between these two amazing products. Um, Before we dive into the session, let me just quickly introduce myself. So I'm running a consulting and training company on the Microsoft data platform, which is called DataPulse. We are mainly operating in France, but also online. I am a Microsoft data platform MVP, like you, Reza. And I am also co-organizing and managing the French Power BI user group. We recently had more than 3,000 members on our meetup page, which is quite awesome. We are really happy about it. We organize monthly meetups, usually in person, but since March 2020, we are doing it online on Teams. We have a forum, we have a YouTube channel, so you are more than happy you're more than welcome to join us. Well, most of the content is in French, so if you want to learn a bit of Power BI and French too, then feel free to join us. Um, so the topic of today, Power BI and Excel, two amazing products, which definitely I would say are part of my personal career. One thing which is interesting with Power BI is the fact that it's, um, the meeting of two worlds. The people who come from the traditional BI world, doing mostly SQL or Azure or like traditional data and BI stuff, they are starting to get involved into Power BI. But the biggest part of the users now, the highest numbers of users now using Power BI come from the Excel world, which is my case too, because I have an Excel background. I was doing a lot of, financial modeling, Excel files with VLOOKUPs, SUMIF, pivot tables a few years ago. And then I randomly discovered Power BI like on YouTube, basically 4 or 5 years ago. And, I understood that there was a shift. And I'm not saying that Power BI is gonna replace Excel. We will talk about it at the end. But yeah, these two products are pretty amazing. They complement each other, and it's quite interesting to see how much Excel users are getting involved now within Power BI. And the goal of this session is to show you, I would say, the most interesting interactions between these two products. So here's the agenda. We're gonna see how we can actually use Excel as a data source for Power BI. So we're gonna start from like really basic stuff, and then we're gonna increase more and more the level of difficulty. We will see how we can actually export data back to Excel from Power BI. We will see how we can actually build pivot tables, Excel pivot tables, and charts on top of a Power BI dataset. And then we will see that Power BI also exists within Excel, as you probably know, with Power Pivot and Power Query. And we will see the kind of interactions you can implement and use between Power BI within Excel and the whole Power BI ecosystem, like Power BI Desktop, Power BI Service, and so on. So this infographic is a bit old. It has been built by fellow MVP Gilbert Quevillier, who is from Australia. It's still relevant to show this kind of thing in a conference or in a webinar, because it shows you like the Power BI ecosystem. During the demo, I'm gonna mostly use Power BI Desktop, which is free, and you have to download it every month when there are new updates, but also the service, because Excel interacts with both Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service. So let's start with the first demo, pretty basic. As you may know, in Power BI Desktop, we have connectors. So if I go here to get data, I have access to the most common data sources. And if I click on the More button at the bottom, here I can access to all the data sources which are currently available within Power BI Desktop. And obviously, Excel is part of it. And by the way, it's probably the most popular. And in terms of usage today, I don't know if it's a good or bad news. It's another topic. But today, if we focus on facts, Excel is probably the most popular data source for Power BI. So you can actually grab data from any Excel file, which is either local or on your OneDrive or SharePoint. For this example, I'm just gonna show you how you can actually use the power of Power BI and Power Query to connect to this disorganized Excel file, which is about sales data, which is fake, basically. And we're going to see how in a couple of minutes we can grab the data in Power BI, reshape it, and build a quick report. So I'm going to actually close this file. I don't need it again anymore. I'm going to use the Excel connector, and I'm going to grab my data source. So here I can pick my Excel file. Power BI is going to connect to my file, and it's going to detect all the sheets which are currently in the file. Here I'm going to focus on this one, which are the sales volumes. And I'm going to go here into transform data, because as you can see, the data is not really clean. I need to reshape it. I need to clean it if I want to be able to analyze it. So here it's the first use case. We have Excel as a data source. We don't do anything in Excel. We're not going to do copy paste, VLOOKUPs or anything in Excel. The data stays as it is in Excel, and we're going to use the power and the flexibility of Power Query to reshape the data. So here, for example, I'm going to rename this query sales, and I'm simply going to use the wonderful interface of Power Query, where I can click on any buttons, which basically apply a step to my table, a step which is recorded here on the right side of the screen. So here, for example, I have promoted the years, so it's easier for me to read the data. Here I can fill down the continents, so I don't have any blank or null values. I'm gonna actually get rid of null values here, so I can only focus on the cities and countries which are relevant. I'm gonna split this column so I can easily distinguish the city and the country using the comma delimiter, or I can use a custom delimiter if I want to put comma space. So as you can see here, without coding, I can just simply use the power of Power Query, which is one part of Power BI, to actually reshape and clean my data. Let's continue. So here I'm gonna rename this continent, here city, country. And now I'm gonna show you one of the most powerful features of Power Query, unpivot. So these columns are okay, but now here I have one column for every year. This is not really easy to analyze and build charts on top of this kind of structure. So I'm gonna actually right click and unpivot all the other columns, all the years, so that I can have, you know, a raw data which is easy to use, easy to interpret for Power BI. So here it's going to be my years. Sorry, I was about to type in année, which is basically the French word for years. Anyway, so years and let's say quantities. And then I'm just gonna apply the data types. So here it's gonna be a text, here it's gonna be a whole number, and here it's gonna be a whole number too. So as you can see, this is the first use case. I have used Power BI and Power Query to connect to an Excel file, which had this kind of structure. And without coding, just by using the buttons available in the interface of Power Query, I have been able in a couple of minutes to reshape my data so that I can analyze it more easily. And then obviously, I'm ready to load this data to my Power BI file. Obviously, I did not edit or change anything in the Excel data source. This source remains the same. I have just imported the data into Power BI, reshaped it, and then it's ready for the analysis. So here I can see my table in Power BI, which is beautiful and perfectly organized for data analysis. And obviously, I can build any chart on top of this table. This is not the goal of this session. I'm not going to show you how you can build beautiful reports with Power BI. That's probably the topic for another session. But still, I can show you how amazing and how quick it can be to build this kind of reports. And why is it so easy? It's because I could use the power and the flexibility of Power BI to reshape my data using Power Query. And then we have this. Okay, so that was the first demo. We start from a raw data in Excel and we reshape it using the power and the flexibility of Power Query. And then obviously I can build a report, I can share it to colleagues and so on. Okay, so that was the first use case. Now the question that usually comes up is, okay, I'm satisfied, I'm more than happy to get this report, but can I export this data back to Excel? There's another underlying question, which is it a good or a bad idea to do this? But I will get back to this later. But still, let's answer this question. Can we export this data back to Excel for any further or separate analysis? So the answer is obviously yes. Power BI is a Microsoft product, so there is no reason why Microsoft would not allow you to export this data back to Excel. There are actually several ways you can do this with Power BI today. First, if I go back to Power Query, you can actually do it within Power Query. I don't know if you have already used it, but here, if you click on this icon on the top left-hand corner of your table, you will be able to copy actually the table, which is the result of your query. Okay, so if I do this, I can simply copy the table and I can go to any Excel file and simply paste it. Now you have to be careful with something. For this example, because it's a demo, I have really small data. Like I only have 144 rows. Okay, as you may know, Power Query works with a sample of the data. It only works with the first 1,000 rows of your table. So if you do this, so if you actually use this button to copy the entire table, I find this word a bit confusing because I think that if your table actually has more than 1,000 rows, if you copy it within Power Query, then when you paste it to Excel, you will only get the top 1,000 rows. So you have to be really careful about this, especially if you are working with large amounts of data. Also, keep in mind that Excel only contains 1 million rows. So it could be a problem for you if you have a table in Power BI which has, I don't know, 5 or 10 million rows. Let's keep this in mind, obviously, yes. But still, you have this option. For example, sometimes I use it when I want to quickly check something in Excel, and I know that I have less than 1,000 rows. I can really quickly, with using this button within Power Query, I can quickly copy it back to Excel. So this is the first way I can do it, at the table level within Power Query. You can also use here the data view, okay, within Power BI desktop. So now I am no longer on Power Query. I have loaded my data into the Power BI data model, but still at this point, I am also able to copy or export this result into an Excel file, for example. I can simply right-click on any area of this table, and I have a button. Here I have an option which is also a copy table. This time, if you have more than 1,000 rows, they will be copied too. So for example, if my table had 5,000 rows right now, if I copy it and paste it, it would work. It would actually copy the full table, okay? So that's another way to do this from Power Query, from the data view of Power BI desktop, but this is at the table level, okay? So you need to be a developer and you need to use Power BI desktop to do this. There is actually another layer, another option for you to export the data back to Excel. It's at the visual level. So I'm gonna show you how you can actually export data to Excel from a visual, either as a Power BI developer, so someone who is using Power BI desktop, or as a Power BI consumer. So for example, if you send a report to someone in your organization or somewhere else, then these people can also apply this technique and copy data from a visual to Excel, for example. So I'm going to show you first on Power BI desktop. So for example, here I have a visual which gives me the quantities by continent. If I click on the visual here, I have an option, I have a setting, if I click, which allows me to export the data. And this time it won't be at the table level, but at the visual level. Okay, so if I do this, I will export the data. I only have the CSV file available to me. So let's say I want to save this file with this particular name, quantities by continent. I can simply save it. And if I go back here, as you can see, I have my file, which is a CSV file, and it contains only the data with the quantities by continent. If I open it, you will see that I only have the quantities by continent. So it has only exported the data coming from the visual. One thing to note is that, for example, if you click on a chart, so for example, if you put a filter on your report, then when you export the data, it will take into account the filters which are currently available at the moment of the export. So for example, if you focus on a year, on a company, on a customer, or anything which could be in your data model, when you export the data, it will be taken into account, and it will only export the data within this context. Okay? So we have imported data coming from Excel. We reshaped it using Power Query. we managed to export it at the table level, at the visual level, within Power BI Desktop. But you can also do this from the service. So for example, here, let's say I'm gonna open this report. So here, I am not using Power BI Desktop anymore. I am in the service, okay? I'm in the cloud. I have logged in with my account here, okay? As the owner of the report, or also if I was a consumer of this report, I can also export the data from any chart, any visual in the service. Again, it will take into account the filters which are currently available when I export the data. But this time, I have several options available to me. I can either export summarized data, so it will basically do the same as the exports which just happened in Power BI Desktop. It will just export the aggregated data from the chart. But you see that there is another option here, which is grayed out, and I will explain to you why in a couple of seconds. But underlying data, what is it? It's basically the raw data which helped build the chart, actually. So from the service, not from the desktop, but from the service, your users also have the ability, when you allow them to do so, to export the raw data, which is basically the data coming from your data model, which created the aggregation and then the chart. As you can see here on my screen, this option is not available to me. It's grayed out, so I cannot tick it. Why? Because as it is written here, I don't have the permission to export the underlying data, simply because I have disabled this setting. So you can do this from Power BI Desktop. At the report, at the dataset level, you can restrict the export scenarios. There might be some situations where you don't want your users, the consumers, you don't always want them to be able to export the underlying data. So you can do it from Power BI Desktop in the settings. You can also do it at the enterprise level in the admin settings. So if you may have a Power BI administrator who is able to apply this kind of setting, either at the group level or at the company level. One thing to note as well is the fact that I have two formats available at the export, either Excel or CSV. And as you can see, each file format has restrictions on the number of rows too. So it's 30K for CSV and 150,000 rows for Excel. And it's because I am a Power BI Pro user. If I was a Power BI free user, I would not be able to export more than 30K rows, even with the Excel export. Okay, so you can export the data, summarized or underlying, and you can restrict this option from the tenant at the tenant level or at the report level. I have just summarized this into a slide. Maybe Reza, I will send you the presentation so that you can share it to our participants. But basically, here is just a recap of what I've shown you. You can, from Power BI Desktop, export either at the table or at the visual level. And from the service, as a Power BI developer or as a Power BI consumer, you can only export at the visual level, either into CSV or to Excel. Keep in mind that your licensing might impact the number of rows you are able to export. 30K in free and 150K in Power BI Pro. And as I've told you, this kind of setting can be adjusted by you as the report developer or by the Power BI administrator in your organization. Okay, so we've seen how we can import data from Excel, how we can reshape it using Power BI. We've seen different scenarios where we can export the data from Power BI back to Excel or CSV. There is another option, which to me is much more interesting. It's called Analyze in Excel. There is one big problem with exports. It's called data silos. Whenever you allow your end users or your consumers to export the data back to Excel, then you lose the trace. You don't know what they will be doing with this export. You don't really know how they're gonna actually use this data, what kind of reports or KPIs they're gonna build on top of this export. So it's in terms of governance, BI and enterprise governance, it's not really good to do this kind of thing. I'm not saying you should disable exports in your organization. I am just saying that there are other scenarios that you should explore if you have your data analyst, your marketing people, your cost controllers who want the data in Excel. There are other scenarios, and one scenario to explore, which to me is much better in terms of governance and also to prevent data silos, is to use this feature which is called Analyze in Excel. So basically, there are two ways you can use this feature. So here I'm back on the service. I'm on Power BI service. If I go to the data sets over here, so for example, I am on a workspace here. I'm gonna go to a data set. For example, here I have a data set which is about sales, okay? And if I click on the three dots over here, there is a button which is called Analyze in Excel. So basically, again, if you give the ability to you or to your end users to do that, any people who has access to the report or the data set can actually, within your organization, analyze the data in Excel. Let's see what's happening. I'm gonna click on this button. As you can see here, Power BI tells me that there is an Excel file ready. And it's here. So it's gonna create a new file. And as you can see here, this Excel file is one sheet, which is basically a pivot table. And this pivot table has, on the right side, all the fields coming from my Power BI data model. So there are some people sometimes who are a bit surprised because sometimes they ask the question, but where is the data? Like, you don't have any other sheets right now in the file. So what's actually the source of this Excel pivot table? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Just a comment. As you may have noticed, my Excel is in French. Sorry for that. I did not manage to switch to the English version of Office before the demo, but don't worry, I will do the translation for you. And the good news is that today you will learn both Power BI and a bit of French too, which is awesome, isn't it? Anyway, so if I want to show you the actual source of this pivot table, I can go to the pivot table analysis and then go to the source settings. If I go to the properties, as you can see here from this screen. The source of my pivot table is something, as you can see on Azure, and here there is like kind of a web URL. Don't worry, the data is not public. It's not published on Google. It is somewhere in a Microsoft data center. It is secured, centralized, governed, refreshed, and any users in your organization who have the right to do that, to connect to the data, can build Excel pivot tables on top of this golden centralized unified Power BI dataset, which is quite awesome because if we compare to export scenarios here, you can make sure that any people who do this will connect to the same source, to the same model. So they will have the same KPIs, the same results. You won't spend 30 minutes during your meetings trying to figure out why the neighbor has different figures than yours. Well, you should have the same now that you have built a structure which allows you to build reports or Excel pivot tables on top of this Power BI dataset. So you might wonder, but what is a Power BI dataset? Well, actually, it's this, okay? It's what you build in Power BI Desktop. It's actually a model which contains the tables, the relationships. Here, I don't have any relationships because I just have one table, but in real life, you're trying to compare data coming from different data sources and so on. So you actually build what we call a cube or a data model, which contains tables, columns, relationships, and KPIs, which are mostly in DAX measures. So this is the whole data model. And what I've just shown you here is the ability to connect to this data model from Excel. And now we are home, we are in Excel. So for example, I can analyze my data by month, and let's say here it's the sellout. I can also see, for example, the sell-in. And as you can see, the data model is quite well structured in Power BI. It has a great structure. What I mean by structure is that there are some fields which are hidden. I have put the KPIs into different folders so that my users can easily find the different KPIs and fields to use. Here, there is also an option for you, rechercher in French, it means find, okay? So basically you can type in anything. For example, if we have a look at, I don't know, quantities, let's say units, maybe, yeah, units. And there we go. I have all the fields which contain, sorry, the word units in the data model. So it's quite awesome. Here we can summarize this into one word: self-service BI. Why? Because you allow people in your organization to build a report on top of a centralized dataset. So here you have your Power BI dataset, as I've shown you, and several people in your organization can build report 1, report 2, report 3. And as you can see, these reports can be Excel pivot tables. But the real advantage is that these pivot tables are connected to the same data source. So you prevent, you fight against data silos. Anytime the data set is refreshed, then all the subsequent Excel files which are connected to this dataset get refreshed too. If, for example, the dataset owner adds a new column, a new measure, or a new table, then the users will just need to right-click and click on refresh. Actualiser in French means refresh, okay, as you can see from the icon here. And they will just get in a couple of seconds the fresh data coming from this centralized governed dataset, which is quite awesome. There is actually another option to do this analyze in Excel. The first demo I did was, going in the service from the Power BI portal and downloading from any dataset the Excel file. There is actually another option, which is, in my opinion, much better now. If we open a new Excel file, I'm gonna go to here, it's called data, okay, data, données in French is data, get data. And here, what you see is actually the Power BI dataset connector. So without leaving Excel, I can stay in Excel. I don't have to go to the service, log in and download the file from Excel, directly from Excel. In a couple of seconds, I have logged in with my corporate account and I can just connect to my Power BI datasets. On the right side, you will see all the datasets which I have created in Power BI and published to the service, but also the datasets which I have access to. For example, if I have colleagues in my organization who have built Power BI datasets in Power BI Desktop, they can publish them to the cloud and then share these datasets, kind of a catalog, so that other users in the company can build reports. And here it's the same thing. I can connect to my dataset, and in 2 seconds, I have a pivot table which is connected to my Power BI dataset in the cloud. And I can do any report and self-service BI on top of this centralized governed dataset. So now you probably understand a bit more why I do prefer this option compared to exports. There are some scenarios which are not covered by the analyze in Excel like this. And I know that there are some situations where clients, customers, colleagues, stakeholders, they want the raw data and they want to be able to export the data from your visuals. So that's more than okay. And I have shown you earlier how you can allow them to do so. But most of the time, when your colleagues, friends, stakeholders, clients, customers, suppliers will ask you to get the data in Excel, the first question you should ask them is why? Why do you want to do this? What are you going to do once you have exported the data? And you will see that most of the time, if you explain to them this kind of settings and this kind of option, you will see that they will actually prefer to do that, because here they can build their reports directly from your dataset, but in a, I would say, in a more robust and flexible way, right? So that was about the analyze in Excel. Today, unfortunately, you can only connect to datasets, okay? Power BI datasets, which are built in the desktop, okay? Oh, sorry. Soon, it has been announced by Microsoft publicly, and it's available in the roadmap, probably in a few months, hopefully. Soon, in Excel, we will have a connector, which will probably show up around here, which will be called Power BI Data Flows. So I'm not working at Microsoft. I cannot tell you exactly when, but Microsoft is working on enabling or allowing Excel users to connect to Power BI data flows directly from Excel. For those who don't know what is a Power BI data flow, basically it's Power Query online. So there are some scenarios where your end users, they don't necessarily want to connect to the dataset because they don't necessarily want to use your DAX measures or your cube. They just want the raw data, but connected. Like they want a table, a raw table, but connected to your system. For example, for a reference purposes or anything which does not really require data analysis. So data flow is probably a good thing for that because you can share and reuse tables, clean tables across the organization. And soon, Excel users will be able to connect easily to a Power BI data flow directly from Excel, which is awesome. And it shows you that Microsoft is really working on, increasing the interactions between the Power BI ecosystem and the Excel community. Okay, so you have seen the analyze in Excel. I have summarized this into a slide. So the analyze in Excel, it creates a live connection to the Power BI dataset. One thing important to note is that it requires Power BI Pro or a PPU license, Power BI Premium per user. There is one exception, and I don't want to go too much into the details of the licensing today. If we have questions about this, I'm more than happy to answer, but there is one exception. If your dataset resides in a premium P capacity, like P1, P2, P3, you can allow self-service BI. You can allow your users to connect to the underlying Power BI dataset without having to buy them a Power BI Pro license. But the condition, the requirement, is that the underlying Power BI dataset resides in a premium P capacity, like the big premium at $4,500 per month, approximately. But for big companies, like we have big clients where there are some users who want to do self-service BI in Excel. Well, they can do this without having a Power BI Pro license internally. One thing to note as well, role level security applies. What does it mean? It means that let's imagine that you have a corporate dataset where you have put some rules in the model. For example, you said that this group of people or this person should only see New Zealand data or United States data or this specific category of products. Obviously, if you allow these users to connect to your dataset from Excel, the role level security will work. It will apply, which means that when the users will connect to the dataset from Excel, they will only see the data that they are supposed to see. So if you said that this person should only see France, then when this person uses this analyze in Excel feature, this person will only see France data. Okay, so this is really important. So as you can see, there are two ways you can do this, either from the service by clicking on the three dots and exporting back to Excel, or you can use the Power BI connector within Excel. It requires a Microsoft 365 Excel with Microsoft 365. You know that there are probably dozens of ways you can get Excel as a user. If you want to have the connector show up in Excel, you need to have Excel through your Microsoft 365 subscription, either as a E3 or E5 license. At the beginning, Microsoft had said when they announced this connector, they were saying that it would only work for E5 customers, which is the biggest, the highest level of licensing in Office, in Microsoft 365. But Microsoft listened to the community and to the MVPs like Reza and me, and they now have allowed E3 customers, so the customers which have a lower tier, which is probably the biggest today in terms of volumes of users in the world. So for example, me, I have a E3 subscription. I don't have E5 in my organization, but still I have the connector working and showing up in my Excel file. Okay. And again, if you don't want your users to be able to do this kind of analysis, you can disable it either at the dataset level or at the tenant level. If you never want your users to do this, it can be adjusted and eventually turned off by your admins. Okay, one last thing before it will be the last part of the session, and then maybe we can take a couple of questions. I just want to show you that, as you probably know or not, Power BI exists within Excel, and basically it was here before Power BI Desktop. You can actually use Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, or Power Map. Well, to be honest with you, today, these two, even though it's still working and it's still available in Excel, there is a very low usage today precisely because we have Power BI Desktop and the service and all this ecosystem. There's no reason why. I don't see a good reason why you would use Power View or Power Map in Excel today, because you should probably do this in Power BI today. But still, if you want to use the power of either Power Query to reshape your data or Power Pivot to build relationships between tables, to build KPIs such as ratios, time intelligence calculations, you can actually do this from Excel. And it has been here for a long time. Power Pivot, Excel 2010, so more than 10 years ago. And Power Query, Excel 2013, so approximately 7-8 years ago already. To be honest, the first versions were not really easy to get and were not really stable. There were some compatibility issues. Sometimes it would crash a bit. But today it's much more stable, especially since the version 2016 of Excel. You can really use them without any problems, Power Query or Power Pivot. So here I'm just gonna show you a very quick example. I have an Excel file here, and as you can see here, I have some shortcuts which give actually access to Power Query, because yes, as I've told you, Power Query exists within Excel. So here, if you go to, again, the same view as before, to the data view, data, okay, in Excel, here, as you can probably recognize, it is Power Query. In Excel. Here, it's called get data, obtenir des données, get data. And as I've shown you earlier, you can actually grab data from many different data sources. There are more connectors today in Power BI Service or in Power BI Desktop than in Excel. But still, there are many different connectors right now that you can use directly within Excel. You can grab data from an Excel file, from a JSON, from PDF, from a folder, from SharePoint, from Azure, from IBM, from Oracle, from Azure, from the web. Like there are many, many, many different connectors. And basically, it will work exactly the same as in Power BI Desktop. It's the same engine, Power Query, it's the same language, and more or less the same interface. So here, for example, I can quickly show you the queries of this Excel file. So now I am showing you Power Query, but not within Power BI Desktop, but within Excel. As you can see here, it's called Power Query, but as you can recognize here, it's the Excel logo. And welcome home. It's Power Query. It's the same interface. Okay, more or less the same buttons, the same principle of applied steps and the queries and so on. In this particular example, in this Excel file, what I've done is that I have actually consolidated multiple files coming from the same folder. Okay, I had several Excel files which I wanted to consolidate very quickly in Excel. Then I don't need to use VBA or Python or whatever. I can just simply use the power of Power Query, and using the folder connector in Power Query, I can actually connect to this folder, reshape the data, and build a Power Pivot data model within Excel. So here I had my queries, and if I go to the data model, which is basically Power Pivot in Excel, you will probably recognize the ancestor of Power BI Desktop. It's the same principle. So I can actually create a data model, which is called a Power BI a dataset in the Power BI language. But here again, I am not using Power BI Desktop. I'm within Excel. Okay, I'm on an Excel file. The data is stored differently using the Vertipack engine. And here I could build basically a cube or a tabular model, creating relationships between the table. And I can also create DAX measures or calculated columns. Again, it's the same logic and the same language, the same principles as what you have probably already learned in Power BI Desktop. So here, for example, I have a very basic measure which sums the column amount of this table. And then once I have developed my Power Queries in Excel, created this data model in Excel, I can use tableau croisé dynamique, pivot table. Okay, as you can see, it's much longer in French. Tableau croisé dynamique, pivot table. So you can actually create a pivot table on top of this cube, of this tabular model, which I'm going to do right now, to a new sheet. And then again, it's just Excel, okay? But I have developed a fully autonomous BI solution with queries which are automated, a cube, and here, for example, I can see my DAX measure, and I can just slice and dice the data, self-service BI. I don't know, probably, I don't know why it's percentage. I would need to change it in my model, probably a mistake anyway. And yeah, for example, I can build this report, which basically gives me the data for any filter context I want. Anyway, okay. So that's Power BI within Excel. Pretty amazing, pretty powerful. You can actually build BI solutions within Excel. And the good news is that if you already know DAX and Power Query, as you can see, it's the same logic, kind of the same interface. And it's quite powerful. To be honest, today, I think the Power BI usage within Excel is decreasing. I see less and less models and queries developed in Excel, but still it's here, it's available, and it's good to know that it's here, because maybe one day it could help you solve one particular scenario or business case, right? So Reza, I don't know where we are in terms of timing. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you for. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you for your session. It was wonderful. There was some questions about the export, the ability to export data versus like analyzing Excel, which have been discussed. Really nice. Oh, I hear myself back as well. Is it because I have a window open? Sorry, I just check it. No, seems it is fine. Okay, so sorry about that. There are still a couple of questions. One of them is that can you explain the main difference between export to Power BI and publish to Power BI from Excel?
So this is a good question. So basically, when you are opening an Excel file, if you go to File and publish here, you can actually publish your Excel file on Power BI, and there are actually two options available to you. So sorry, it's in French. I'm really sorry for that, but you can upload your Excel file on Power BI. So here I've logged in. This is my account.
If you share your screen, that would be good too.
Sorry, I forgot to share my screen. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Yes.
Great.
So if I go to Excel, File, Publish, you can actually upload your workbook to Power BI. This is this first option, and basically it will create an Excel window or an Excel workbook online within your Power BI environment. And Microsoft announced yesterday that this feature, which I've just shown you, so the ability to create pivot tables within Excel, it will work. If you deploy, if you publish an Excel file to your Power BI workspace, for example, or to a Power BI app, it will actually be displayed and it will work interactively within the Power BI environment. So this is the first option. And the second option, you can actually export or publish not the front layer, but the back layer. So for example, let's imagine that here I have a Power Pivot model, which was actually this one. Maybe I want some users in my organization to be able to build Power BI reports from Power BI Desktop, for example, using this data model as the data source, right? And if I use this setting, it will publish not the Excel file itself, but the underlying data set, like the underlying data model, which will be transformed as a Power BI data set. And so that I can spread self-service BI across my organization and allow any Power BI developer to build Power BI reports on top of this data set, which is actually a Power Pivot Excel model. Yeah, I don't know if it answers the question, but
awesome.
Yeah.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. There was also another question about when do you use the data types in Excel or feature table in Power BI. But if the answer to that is a long answer, we can skip that.
So yeah, the answer is it depends. There is a new feature which allows you to feature tables in Power BI and reuse them in Excel. I did not show you this today, because I didn't have time. But yeah, this new setting is available. I don't use it that much, to be honest. I had some bugs at the beginning. I know I have some clients who use it. I don't know, Reza, if you use this feature a lot,
No, I
but
haven't used it at all.
there is a great blog post from Chris Webb, who is now working at Microsoft, about this new feature, which I really encourage you to read, because yeah, it's really interesting.
Great, awesome. Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. It was a great presentation, Tristan. Thanks, a lot of great comments, and this would be available here for everyone to watch again. And as soon as we get the slides from Tristan, we'll put it also here as a comment of this YouTube video. Any last things to say?
No, well, I just wanted to say thank you. It was a lot of fun for me. I had a lot of things to show you. As you can see, the session was intense. There was a lot of content. So I hope you enjoyed it. And Reza, I hope to see you again soon in person.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and thank you
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
See you
Bye-bye.
next time. Bye.